الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على نهجه وما استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So tonight insha'Allah ta'ala, this is I think session 10 that we have of the Prophet's prayer described, and we are now at the arkan of the salah, the arkan or the pillars of the prayer. And the pillars of the prayer are many. And inshallah we will try to go through every single one of them before we go on to the other categories, where we will talk about the sunnah acts of prayer and the wajibat acts of prayer as well. The very first rukn of as-salah, we have discussed it already, which was the intention of the salah. And then immediately after will come the Surah Al-Fatiha. We will also talk about the takbir, the saying Allahu Akbar and beginning the prayer like this. This is also part of the arkan of the salah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us فَكَبِّرْ, to say the takbir when you begin the prayer. This automatically eliminates anybody to start prayer in any other method. So you can't say Bismillah and start praying. You can't say Ar-Rahman. It always has to be the takbir of Allahu Akbar. We talked about why the wisdom of Allahu Akbar is in the prayer in our past discussions. We talked about when we discussed the secrets of the prayers by Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. We talked about one of the wisdoms or the secrets behind saying Allahu Akbar is this just literally sets the tone of what prayer is all about. It's to adhere and to affirm the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is the greatest. You affirm that by bowing to Him. You affirm that by prostrating to Him. And you affirm that by constantly praising Him and seeking dua to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. But coming now to Surah Al-Fatiha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us in an authentic hadith narrated in Bukhari and Muslim that the person, when they wake up for the salah, they should perform a perfect wudu. فَأَسْبِغِ الْوُضُوء. So they should perform a proper wudu with all of the implications. It should be done right and everything should be done correctly. And we went through the steps of the wudu and we've done this discussion as well. Then the Prophet ﷺ, after saying that when you go to the prayer and you say Allahu Akbar, it should start off with the Fatiha. Now there are some du'as that you can say, the du'a called the Sana. And then there are other du'as that involve certain Quranic verses that can also be said. But when it comes to the Fatiha, there are a number of different rulings that come about. The Prophet ﷺ once called this Fatiha or this surah the mother of the entire Quran. That is a very profound statement to make. Imagine you call this one surah the mother of Allah's book. Everything about Allah's book is entailed and it's restricted into this one surah. Everything that you want to know about who Allah Azza wa Jal is found in this one surah. Just listen to the way it starts. It starts off by praising Allah Azza wa Jal. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So who is Allah? Allah is Rabbul Alameen. He is the master, the guardian. He is the carer, the protector of all of mankind. Tell me a little bit about who Allah Azza wa Jal is. Well, the first thing that you should know is Alhamdulillah. All praise is due to Allah. And I'm going to tell you His name as well. His name is Allah. All of this is found in the first verse, in the first ayah of Fatiha. The reason why you start off the salah this way is that you affirm in your heart and in your practice who you're going to be praying to. So you start eliminating all the distractions. You stop thinking about life and work and school and things like that. You start to put all of this behind us. This is one of the ways that you know when a person has a sealed heart, or a heart that is a qaswatul qalb. It's a hardened heart. One of the ways that you know is that the greatest acts of worship that you do for Allah becomes like a routine. It becomes like cooking. It becomes like sleeping. So salah ends up becoming the same way. This is one of the ways that you know Allah has stamped that heart of that individual. And Allah Azza wa Jal tries to change all of this. Tries to change all of this by setting the tone. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Introduces himself. He doesn't need any introduction, but he tells us who he is. Tell me a little bit about who Allah is. And that's where it continues. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. The first thing that you should know about Allah Azza wa Jal is that He is the most gracious, the most merciful. Shaykh Abdul Rahman As-Sa'di rahimahullah tells us in his tafsir that these two things, the Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, these are two different types of mercies from Allah. One of them is for us here in the dunya, including the non-Muslims, whereas the other is restricted only to the mu'minun on Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's why in this world, even the non-Muslims, you don't have to be a believer specifically to be under that general protection of Allah Azza wa Jal. So certain earthquakes and things like that, it's not just going to affect one group of people, but it's going to be protected from all those individuals. That's a type of rahmah or mercy that Allah gives that is for the am, that's for everyone. That's the first thing that you want to know. Why? What does that have to do with the salah? It's the first thing. It's really interesting because Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah mentions that Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim is to start to put in your heart that anything that you want in your salah, anything that you ask for, you're always going to feel and know in your heart that Allah is the most merciful. In other words, what that does is that makes you feel positive and good about yourself, that inshallah Allah is going to give you with what you want. What you ask for, Allah inshallah is going to give it to you because He's Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Tell me a little bit about the strength and the authority and the power of Allah Azza wa Jal. He is Maliki Yawmiddin. You notice all three of these verses only have to do with Allah Azza wa Jal. Has nothing to do with you yet. There's no role that you play in any of this yet. Allah is simply telling us about Himself. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now He is Maliki Yawmiddin. So after you establish that you praise Allah, then you establish that He is most gracious and most merciful, now you need to know how you're going to get the result of all of this. And that is, He is the master of the day of judgment. It's almost as if Allah Azza wa Jal strikes fear in your heart and leaves you with that. That's the last thing Allah tells us about Him. It's something scary. It's something that's very difficult for us to comprehend. You know, subhanallah, Allah is going to be the master of this day of judgment. So what do? Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'bud wa Iyyaka nasta'een. That's what you do. That's so that you get His Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim upon you. That's so that you can protect yourself from Maliki Yawmiddin, and that's so that you can always have throughout your salawat, throughout your life, embedded in your heart that Alhamd is Lillahi Rabbil Alameen. How do you do it? Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'een. It's only for you, Allah, that I'm devoting all of my worship, and I'm going to hold on to the rope of Allah and hold on to the hope in you throughout my praise, throughout my life. A lot of people, they ask this question about, I'm doing the same thing in my life over and over. And I keep asking Allah for things over and over. And I keep trying to make changes over and over, and it's just not helping. Nothing is working. What do I do? Iyyaka na'bud. That's the first thing that you have to do. You have to make sure that you perfect your worship before you can ask Allah for help, or you devote yourself in that hope to Allah Azza wa Jal. You got to make sure that you're perfect in that worship. Let's just pause here for a moment. Now all that you've heard so far, it's time for salah. And you're standing there and you say Allahu Akbar. All that you've heard about Fatiha so far. Imagine now the person who starts off and he says, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'een. They're just trying to run through it, rush through every single moment in the Fatiha. Majority of ulama, including the four madhahib, they say that this here, a person who recites Fatiha in this manner and recites it like a parrot. Now you know there are 3 levels of reciting Quran, 3 levels of doing this. One level of it is a very quick level where you would recite it more so in Taraweeh and Tahajjud, which will sound something like this: Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'in, until the end. And then you just continue. This is more of a Tahajjud or Qiyamul Layl kind of prayer. Then you have something a little bit lower, a lesser degree. And then you have one of the slower recitations of the Quran, which is the Qari and the Abdul Basit style and so on. Which one is fit for the prayer? It's the first 2. It can also be the third, but there is some dislikeness to it. Some ulama did put some dislikeness to a person who recites Surah Fatiha or recites the Quran in Salah, like the tartil of, like a recite like a Qari, like Abdul Basit or something. And you recite in that slow, melodious voice. Some scholars put a little bit of a dislikeness to that because that's not the intent of the salah itself. The intent of the salah is not for you to just perfect recitation. It's more than that. So to find a balance, you do the first 2 categories. It's the middle category that's the most important. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. And then you continue. Just a slow, calm, relaxed voice. That's the first rule of Fatiha. The first rule of Fatiha is you don't rush. Majority of the 4 madhahibs, they say that a person who does this with Fatiha, the salah is nullified. It's not accepted. Why are they so strict about this? It's because Fatiha, remember we said, is a pillar of the salah. The Prophet ﷺ said that there is no salah illa bi Fatiha. There is no prayer except for the person who recites Surah Fatiha. Then in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ tells you how to do it. زَيِّنُوا أَصْوَاتَكُمْ بِالْقُرْآنِ. Beautify your voices with the Quran. So he tells you what you should do, and then he tells you how you should do it. This is why in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ also encouraged us that the way that we pray in our homes should be similar to the way you pray in jama'ah. What happens a lot of time? A lot of times people, when they pray at home, they pray like the chicken. Like the Prophet ﷺ mentions, that's how the chicken is eating. They're just pecking through the ground and through all the movements. But when you're in jama'ah, for the person it might be something different. They come to the jama'ah and they're relaxed and the sutra is there and everything. I know one brother, actually there's a couple of them, that I got this question where one person told me that they prayed on their kitchen floor. They prayed on the kitchen floor and they wanted to know if that was permissible or not. And they just did it because, it was time for salah, so they just got caught up in the moment and just prayed on the kitchen floor. So the permissibility, the salah is valid, but it's careless. Because when it's time for prayer, it's the brightest day of the day. It's the brightest moment of your day. So you want to make sure that you take time, you find a nice comfortable spot, and then you pray. So the scholars, when they say this, they say that Fatiha especially should not be rushed through. There's a difference of opinion regarding the other surahs that come after. But Fatiha is the key. Second point. We talked about this in the just after the salah, about the person who makes errors in the salah, especially in the Fatiha. A person who doesn't know how to recite Fatiha. Let me just say, brothers and sisters, that the person who doesn't know how to recite Fatiha well really has problems. They have problems when it comes to their relationship with the Quran. This is the first indication that the Quran has been abandoned by you. You've left the Quran. The first way that you know that you're not attached to Allah's book is when you cannot master the Kitab itself, the Surah Fatiha itself. And you'll be very surprised to know and to see how many people just don't know how to do this very well. I know of a masjid that I went to and I prayed behind this person. It was a young brother. And he started to recite the Fatiha in the Salah. And he started off with a nice little Sudais kind of voice to it. So I was like, MashaAllah, right? And we're just praying behind him. Then when he got to this particular verse, Sirata, oh my goodness, it just went upside down. He said, Sirata al-lazina, and we talked about this, no such word in the Arabic language as al-lazi or al-lazina. And then he says, An'amta. He didn't say An'amta. If you say An'amta, that's Allah Azza wa Jal placing that blessing upon you. An'amta alayhim. So place His barakah and His protection upon it. The barakah is coming from Him. But if you say An'amta, then you're saying that you're the one that's doing this. You see how it's like two different worlds. You've gone from one meaning to something extremely terrible and horrible. That's why, just for the students who are practicing recitation, the best way to know when you're good is when you get to that same verse, Sirata al-ladhina. Just listen and practice for yourself. Make sure that you get the An'amta. Don't add a qalqala to that point. So you don't want to sound like this. Sirata al-ladhina an'amta. You don't want that qalqala sound. Sirata al-ladhina an'amta alayhim. So you want to make that distinction. The reason why I emphasize this so much is one of my teachers in Quran, his name was Sheikh Ubaidullah al-Afghani, rahimahullah. He was one of the teachers of Sheikh Hudayfi and many of the Imams of the Haram. And he was originally an Afghani Sheikh. He left Afghanistan and he came to Medina to look for somebody to teach him. And he was so good that he ended up teaching the teachers that he came to learn from. They end up saying, what are you doing here? You came to learn from us, you should be teaching us. And so for about maybe 50, 60 years of his life, he devoted himself to teaching the Quran. Hundreds of thousands of students have taken ijazah from him as well. And one of the things that he would really, really be shadeed upon, he would really be firm with us, is when it came to this verse. Immediately if you said Sirata al-ladhina an'amta and you had that qalqala there, he will say, Ruh, ya ta'ban. You just say, get out of here, you weakling. You're a weakling, so go. And that's why, like myself and some other brothers, we were on Fatiha for like 3-4 days. We're just trying to get by Fatiha with the Shaykh until we graduated from Fatiha. Alhamdulillah, the Shaykh would give you a bottle of yogurt and he says, Khalas, takharraj min Fatiha. He's like, you graduated from Surah Fatiha, now you can move on to the next Surah. That's how strict he was with it. This all taught me a lot. Imagine if this is how strict Fatiha is outside of Salah, imagine when it's in Salah. Now what do you do when you're praying behind somebody who recites like this? Some of the ulama, they permitted, if it was possible, without causing any fitna, any problems, it actually permitted you to leave the jama'ah and wait until they finish praying and then start your own jama'ah again. In other words, there is no salah for you behind an imam who cannot perfect Surah Fatiha. This is how strict it's begun. And in our times, this almost sounds like something strange because everybody leads prayer now. It doesn't matter who you are. It's just like you're all in so many massages. There's anybody who looks religious, who has some piety in them, or they come from a certain tribe, or they have a certain cultural background or training, you're going to lead us in salah. Sometimes you might have little kids that are leading the jama'ah in salah. They're not mature enough to do this. It doesn't matter if they're hafiz al-Quran. This is a really important point, brothers and sisters. When we train our youngsters, you have to be very selective of who you choose to lead the jama'ah. Because what if that child, that youngster who's memorized the Quran and very fluent, what if they miss a rak'ah? Are they going to know what to do? What if they make an extra rak'ah? Will they know the fiqh behind it? How will they know when to do the sajda to sahu? Is it going to be before the taslim or after the taslim? What happens if the child makes a mistake and has 14 brothers behind him correcting him? Is the child going to listen to the correction or start crying because he's scared? So all of these things you have to make sure, be very selective when you choose youngsters to lead the salah. They have to have that responsibility behind them to maintain the fiqh of the salah itself. So you got this person and you're praying behind him. How do you leave a salah when you're already in the jama'ah? Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah has a very clever way of doing this. Ibn Qayyim says, you leave the salah by intention, but you don't leave the salah by act or physically leave it. But intentionally you leave the salah. So what Ibn Qayyim is saying is that you're going to go along with the jama'ah, you're going to go along with the movements, but your intention is not to follow that imam. So count it as a nafil prayer. Why does Ibn Qayyim, he continues to say, this is found in his book Madarij al-Salikin, and he mentions in there that the reason why you do this is to avoid fitna. Can you imagine if 4 or 5 brothers who are praying behind an imam, they just suddenly stepped out and they stood at the back and they waited? Or they just, did their own jama'ah somewhere else? Can you imagine what that would happen? You don't want to solve a problem by creating bigger problems. That's not good wisdom when you're trying to bring solutions. And then at the same time, when you do things, you always want to avoid fitna as much as possible. So Ibn Qayyim says, go through with the movement. When the salah is done, then go ahead and repeat the salah. Now this here is a very strict opinion. Even though the 4 madhahibs they take it, it is a very strict opinion. Sheikh bin Baz has a different fatwa behind it. Sheikh Uthaymeen also has something different behind it. Sheikh Albani rahimahullah has something different behind it. The point is that you always want to make sure that Fatiha is perfect. So it's upon us that we make sure that we choose people that are qualified to lead the salah this way. So even the elderly, we are no exception to that. The elderly, just because you might be leading salah 20 and 30 and 40 years, it doesn't make you qualified for that position when it comes to the recitation. You might be qualified in fiqh and other things, but this here, just أَعْتِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقًّا. Just give everything that's right where it belongs. Then you have another scenario where if a new Muslimah or a Muslim, they revert to the deen. They don't know what to do. They don't know Surah Fatiha. So what did they do here? Believe it or not, some scholars did allow a person like this to pray in their own language until they could learn it. Majority were against this, because the whole point of salah is that it should be done in Arabic. And this is based on an ijma', a unanimous consensus that all the words of salah should be done in Arabic as well. We get this question all the time about, is it permissible for me to make dua in my salah, in my sujood, in another language other than Arabic? Because I don't know any other languages. Just as I don't know of any narration or any hadith or any exception that scholars made when it came to the salah that you're permitted to do this. Dua can be made in any language outside of salah. But when it comes to the prayer, it has to be in Arabic. Because the Prophet ﷺ says, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli." Pray like exactly the same way you saw me praying. Exactly the same way. Don't try to change or maneuver or do anything. It's got to be exactly 100% the same. Imagine that this statement of the Prophet ﷺ, he went as far as stopping a man and telling him to repeat his prayer because there were certain parts of his arm and his feet that weren't wet. It didn't look like he performed wudu well. There's one Sahaba, there was a part of his ankle or his feet that was dry like the size of a coin. And the Prophet ﷺ saw that. And when the man was done, the Prophet ﷺ says, go and perfect your wudu and repeat your salah. Because of that. So if you went to that extent, then imagine what the Fatiha, where that lies. So for the revert, the best thing is that you must be able to learn the Fatiha at least. The rest of the surahs after Fatiha, those can come later. Because as you all know, the salah in and of itself is acceptable with just the Fatiha itself. Reciting a surah after the salah is considered to be a mustahab act. The salah still becomes valid. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ himself says to read Fatiha. Then he says that after that you should try to read something. But In many cases, for a lot of people, this is not possible. Just make sure that you try to fulfill the rukn of prayer, that pillar. Make sure that Fatiha is there. So for the revert, you can have it written on a piece of paper. You can put it on the floor and try to read it at least to get the prayers done until you memorize it. A third scenario when it comes to the Fatiha. How about if you forget to recite Fatiha, or you miss an ayah of Surah Fatiha and nobody corrects you, you're praying by yourself, and you happen to miss a verse, or you don't even recite the Fatiha, Salah is invalid, period. Right? Because if making mistakes of something you are reciting invalidates the prayer, then surely enough, missing the whole ayah completely will also nullify that prayer. Why is this so important? It's important, again, brothers and sisters, because this is one of those issues where many people, they trivialize it. It becomes so routine that somebody might make a mistake in the Fatiha, but nobody will correct him. This is one of the mistakes of Salah that we make. And when I say that, I include myself, like as Muslims, we will make this at times, where the Imam, he might recite a surah, and he'll make a mistake in it, but nobody will correct him. That in and of itself is okay. It doesn't break the salah when it comes to the surah. It will if it was Fatiha. But when it comes to other surahs, it doesn't break the salah, but you lose reward in that salah. And this is why the ulama, they say that if you forget a verse in the salah, then you do two things. One of two things. One, you either continue wherever you can remember from and just continue the surah that way, or two, stop the rak'ah and go down for ruku'. So you have like some people that will try 3-4 attempts to get that ayah and they keep fumbling at it. So let's say like the ayah of the muharramat al-zawaj. So the people that are haram for you to marry in Surah An-Nisa. You know that verse, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ. So it's got all these rhythmic words to it. A lot of people, they mess up this verse. So I remember one brother, he got to this verse, he was leading us in Qiyamul Layl. He tried it, he messed up. He went back the second time, he messed up. A third time, messed up. 8th time, he messed up. 9th time, until subhanallah, he got to the 10th and he gave up. That's when he went for ruku'. You don't need to go 10 times. 2, 3, 4 times. If you don't get it, be moderate and then go down for the ruku'. I remember praying behind, mashallah, you know, it's subhanAllah, this is just one of the miracles of the Quran. I remember praying behind Shaykh Sudais, subhanAllah, one time, and he got to that verse, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, and he paused. And he couldn't continue the verse, and he had to go down. This is in the Haram in Mecca, you know. And just imagine, somebody so profound. Shaykh Sudais, hafidhahullah, recites 5 juz every single day of his life. 5 juz every single day of his life. That's why he's one of the top huffaz al-Quran in the world. All of you know that. Just all you have to do is just listen to a Taraweeh and listen to how many times he may fumble or not. And then you can see that kind of fluency in him. So going back to our discussion, all of us here, we know how important the Fatiha is. And we stopped off in just a little bit of some of the benefits of Fatiha by اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. This is the verse that we're at now. So we have إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. You're asking Allah to give you guidance on the right path and keep you there. We mentioned that one of the words for the esophagus here in the Arabic language is sartun. Sartun is one of the names of the esophagus, one of the appropriate terms for it. So why is that? What does sartun or the esophagus have to do with sirat al-mustaqim? What it means is that it's talking about the way or the function of the esophagus. When you're healthy and you eat, what happens to the food? It just goes one direction all the time. As soon as there's a problem, what happens? You start to regurgitate and it comes back out the opposite way. So what you're asking Allah is, you're asking Allah, place me on the path that is just one direction. And I don't ever want to turn back from that direction. You want it to always be a one-way street. How do you know you're there? صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. I know that I'm there because I want to be on the same path of the people who came before you. And we talked about this in our past discussion. This is based on a verse in Surah An-Nisa that Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ. This is the first category, the prophets and messengers. وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ, the truthful ones. وَالشُّهَدَاء, the martyrs. وَالصَّالِحِينَ, and the righteous ones. These four categories of people, these are صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ غَيْرُ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. And of course the surah itself concludes itself by discussing something for the Yahud as well as the Nasara. Surah Fatiha, brothers and sisters, is the way that you can improve your devotion and your love with Allah Azza wa Jal in your salah. Don't make salah a routine. Don't make salah things like you do every single day. It's like going to work. It's like cooking food. It's like just, eating. Don't make it a part of it should be the brightest, it should be the sunshine of your day. This is why Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Furqan, when the Prophet ﷺ complains to Allah, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي, and he says to, O Allah, O my Lord, O my Creator, إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. My people, they took this Quran and they've abandoned it. Listen to the Arabic word, هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. He uses هَذَا. Allah uses the word هَذَا. In the beginning of the Quran, what did Allah use? Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ. Now we have the ism qareeb, like we have هَذَا, which means that Allah is saying the Quran was right there. You had it right in front of you and you still abandoned it. Then Allah uses the word mahjura. Mahjura comes from the word hijra or hajara, which means taraktu shay'an or taraka shay. You've left something. But mahjura, this form of the word hijra, it doesn't mean that you've left something. It means that you've left it and you've left it so far away. It's so far behind you. So that tells you that even if you recite Quran, you're not really holding on to Quran by just reciting it. It's talking about the one who is trying to implement and understand and make their life the Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ said, this is what my people have been doing. For the youth, this is so common amongst them. They'll be watching TV or something. They'll see like a guy with like a six-pack, or they'll see LeBron James do like an amazing dunk or amazing move, and that becomes their inspiration. But Allah says, this is, you've taken the Quran mahjura. This is the thing that you're focused on now. This is the things that you're only going to be thinking about each and every single day of your life. So brothers and sisters, all of this to change, it starts off by perfecting your salah. And by perfecting your salah, part of doing so is to perfect the Surah Al-Fatiha. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our tongues moist with the perfection in the recitation of the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to improve our tongues in the fluency of the Quran. Because this is what Musa alayhi salam, when he made dua to Allah Azza wa Jal, and he said to him, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. So Musa alayhi salam, you guys know, he had a stutter problem. So he was the kind of person that would he would talk like this, like always stuttering, trying to find words. So look at the words that he calls upon Allah. He says, "Wahlul uqda." He says to untie the knots of my tongue. It's as if his tongue is all twisted and turned. He says, untie, and he says, wahlul. It's tahleel. Make it easy for me. Make it comfortable for me. يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Why? It's not because I want to be a great speaker. It's not because I want to do this or I want to do that. It's because I want people to understand what I'm saying. I know some speakers, some du'at who used to have this problem, and they made this exact same du'a, and wallahi they are more prolific speakers, more fluent in their tongue than anybody you can imagine. It would be impossible for you to know that this person used to have this problem in their life. So brothers and sisters, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to always keep us close to the Quran. Wallahi, we are in a time where we need this more than ever in our lifetime. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make the Quran a part of who we are, a part of our existence, a part of our identity. And we may ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us close to the fundamentals of the Quran, so that we can recite it each and every single day at least, so that we can implement something of the Quran each and every day at least, and so that we can make the Quran a source of our lifestyle and everything that we say and we do, at least throughout our time in this world. So these are the words, inshaAllah, that we will pause with today. And inshaAllah ta'ala, in our next halaqah on Friday, we will get into the next step of the arkan of the salah. So we will go through each of them one by one and all of the fiqh issues behind them. So I invite you all, inshallah, to continue to join us for that. So that will happen on Friday after Maghrib. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. I thank you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.